yes. Okay, so to get y'all introduced to what we're talking about today, this is a very beginner-friendly talk. As we can see, I am a very beginner when it comes to tech. Today we will be discussing a very introductory malware analysis. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself. I am Alexa, like they said, lab manager. We actually did all this, so I'm just going to skip this slide into the disclaimer, the most fun part, in my opinion. Use common sense when following along with this. Don't run any code you don't understand, and don't send Bitcoin to addresses you don't recognize. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much. Not really. Okay, so as many of you may know, when you're just going around the internet, you sometimes tend to run into some funky stuff, whether that be in the back alleys of the web, in onion sites, peer-to-peer instances, or stuff as regular as pastebin. In fact, from my experience, pastebin oftentimes is more lucrative if you're just seeking for random interesting stuff on the webs. And so this one time, I'm looking around, and I see this very interesting thing, a money emoji, twice, and free, which really kind of like gets the brain rolling. I immediately click it, and that takes me over to this beautiful looking PDF. Great formatting, consistent colors, all of that. And it's outlining an exploit for this platform called G2A, which is a game key reseller. And if you haven't heard of them, they're this pretty cool online marketplace. And they only have like a few tiny little bits of scandals. Only a couple, with this one probably being my very biggest favorite headline that I've ever seen, possibly ever. But yeah, so that PDF available here along with some of the malware itself. You don't have to go through this. This is just like an optional thing if you want to look at the source materials. I'm assured within it that I made the best choice of my life, and it's been, as you can see, crafted to perfection sincerely by VQMO. And in it, I find out that someone apparently paid for it before it got pasted on Pastebin, which is like, lucky me. I just get it for free. So without further ado, let's go through with the exploit. I excitedly read through the instructions of this PDF, and I'm already thinking of, all the Windows licenses that I'm going to be able to buy now. And I see that it tells me to download a TamperMonkey script, which, if you don't know, TamperMonkey is this Chrome extension which allows you to inject your own JavaScript to overlay on top of an existing site, which, according to VQMO here, will allow me to buy products on G2A and then automatically get a refund transferred back to my account. But it only works if I pay in Bitcoin. And I have to transfer at least 0.0021 Bitcoin, which at the time was around 130 bucks, and right now is significantly more than that. Where's the animation? Woo! There we go. Beautiful. Live for that shit. But yeah. So I do that, and I go to the payment method. I see this great big beautiful QR code that I scan, send all of my Bitcoin flying through, add 11 Windows 11 licenses to my car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I wait for my refund to come through. And then I wait. And so I wait. So where'd we go wrong? That'd be going on Pastebin. It sucks. Just Paste.it is better. Let's take a look specifically at the TamperMonkey script that I downloaded earlier and sort of analyze that further. The JavaScript snippet itself is a very long obfuscated script, which essentially means it was made to deliberately be confusing and unclear to follow for both malware analysis and nerds that desperately want to get into cybersecurity. Sorry. And of course, there's legitimate reasons to obfuscate code as well. It's in a lot of proprietary code, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some online tools that can both obfuscate and de-obfuscate JavaScript code. And here we can see an example of that where I'm not going to go in depth as to how obfuscation works, but essentially this top snippet does the exact same thing as this bottom snippet. And so if we run that script through, we see some interesting stuff starting to pop up, such as references to a Bitcoin address and a QR code to scan. And we see that this stuff is incredibly interesting, especially when we're adding it over the existing payment page, right? And if we see the URL right there, we look at it, we go there, and we see, what do you know, a QR code. One that is for a Bitcoin address that does not belong to G2A. Exactly. And so if anyone is confused, I've created this great visual that I think might really help. Put a lot of work into this. There we go. So essentially, VQMO is giving you this JavaScript snippet that takes the real QR code, hides it, and overlays a big fake QR code on top of it. And you don't know that. You're just trying to pay for your keys. And bam, you're done. That's it. Pwned. Any questions so far, by the way? I know I've been moving a little fast. All right, perfect. So now that we're armed with this super cool cyber knowledge, let's take a crack at the other arguably dumber but very similar exploit from the same author. But take it down a little bit at a lower level this time. This variant uses the exact same concept as the previous one, but the actual payload, instead of being a link to a QR code, which can go down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is a QR code. But let me elaborate. How do I know this? I know this because this script, instead of relying on that link, uses base64, which is a binary to text encoding scheme that through dark arts and black magic can both encode and decode images into ASCII strings. And we can tell that this jumble of words and letters, et cetera, is base64 through this really advanced technology technique called looking closer, where we see base64, image, PNG, blah, blah, blah. And so that, if we convert it to a QR code, or, well, to a PNG, we get a QR code. And there we go, bada bing, bada boom. We see another QR code, which is overlaid on top of the real QR code, which is pretty interesting. But let's look at the snippet itself that does all this. How do we actually get a fake QR code on top of the real one? This is the function in, it's, as you can see, very ununderstandable. So let's break it down with the help of a very good friend, Sir ChatGPT, which went ahead and commented up all of our stuff right here. I'm not taking any credit for it, but real quick explanation. We've got this right here, which is scanning the document for the real QR code using the alt text of the web page. And then if it finds that, it also looks at the address of the Bitcoin address. If it finds that anywhere, it replaces that with the attacker's base64 image as well as the attacker's Bitcoin address string. And it also refreshes this every 100 milliseconds in order to win against any race with the page's own JavaScript, if such exists. And so pretty much that's it. It just looks for text that says QR code to scan, replaces it with its own, and then does the same thing with the Bitcoin address. And there you have it. Together, we managed to break down this incredibly complex, super advanced piece of malware consisting of pretty much just phishing and hoping you're not dumb enough, that you are dumb enough to execute JavaScript from some random person on the internet and then send $200 to $300 in a currency known for not being the easiest to get back while said JavaScript is running. Beautiful. But what's the takeaway here exactly? What's the bigger picture? What's the moral of the story? Don't blindly run shit you don't understand, but also don't be scared of doing a little poking because you might find out something interesting in the process. And let's say you are out there, you find a sketchy script in the wild. Running it blindly, as we saw, is not the best idea, but we will get to that in a little bit as well. So call for some backup. ChatGPT and friends, LLM models in general, are sometimes kind of okay at analyzing suspicious code for a general overview and just generally getting you towards the next step and providing guidance as to what to do yourself. But it is a good idea to say that you're doing this in a controlled environment or else it's going to freak out at you and yell at you for good reason. But yeah, as you can see here through poor prompting, it does eventually explain, oh yes, this is a tamper monkey script and it is obfuscating its content and you can unobfuscate, deobfuscate JavaScript through online tools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But sometimes static analysis, meaning analyzing code without actually running it, doing it in your head, whatever, can be a little bit complex than someone new may want. And sometimes you want to see what happens when it runs. Sometimes you want to run it blindly, essentially. Enter virtual machines and sandboxing. When you want to analyze something or other as it actually runs, it's important to be able to keep it on a short leash, obviously, which is what virtual machines, VMs, are ideal for. And by using a VM, you're essentially using another computer inside of your computer, computerception. And you can quarantine whatever malware you're working with specifically to that virtual computer running inside of your computer, which keeps it only there, except in certain cases where it doesn't, and it jumps out through sandbox escapes, which through dark arts that I will not be discussing today can escape onto your host system. Or at the very least, one thing that I will be discussing is they can detect that they are within a VM and stop whatever it is they're doing to avoid analysis. Typically, this is done by fingerprinting your virtual machine for software and hardware common to them. But again, this is usually isolated to more advanced malware that has the chance of being analyzed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you probably don't have to worry about that, but I didn't tell you that. Luckily for us, though, there are also patches for virtual machines that protect against fingerprinting. With this one in particular being shown to me by a certain fellow that makes light bulbs. And this is a pretty good example. Like what it does is, for example, it'll spoof the regular, what is called QEMU keyboard, QEMU being a virtual machine program. It'll just spoof it to say something generic like ASUS keyboard instead, along with a bunch of similar tweaks. And that keeps you safe, and the malware doesn't know that it's in a VM, right? Wrong. Even patch virtual machines can be identified through advanced timing attacks, which again, is so beyond the very surface level of this talk. But in that scenario, it's a good idea to invest in an air-gapped machine, which is essentially a machine that does not have a physical Wi-Fi card if possible, and makes no connection to the outside world. But again, this is a bit overkill for today's discussion. And instead, it's a good idea to be prepared for when things do go wrong with our favorite things, safe backup solutions. Round of applause for backups. Okay, there we go. Thank you. But yeah, safe backup solutions. You either love them because you've had to use them, or you hate them because you haven't had to use them. And backups are a bit of a staple of mine, especially since moving to Let Arch. And if you've been in Queen City Security, or 49 Security Division, you might remember my panic a few years ago now of accidentally moving my entire drive in the middle of class to the downloads directory, which meant that I no longer had access to any binary files such as ls, cd, et cetera, et cetera. Essentially, I bricked my machine while it was on, but Firefox and stuff still worked. That was a very entertaining class period. But yeah, ever since then, you got to keep good backups. You know, your basic 3-2-1 backup rule, 3 copies of data on 2 types of media, with one of them being stored offsite. Essentially, make sure that all of your backups are not in the same place, not on the same type of hardware that's susceptible to failure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, there we go, backups, beautiful. So to recap what we've gone over today, don't run scripts you don't understand. Feel mostly free to run scripts you don't understand in a sandbox. And make sure to keep a backup or 5. And then here I also ended off with a quote from our Wesley greeter, send it, which led to a lot of data loss in the past. But yeah, I ended off with this crappily photoshopped together Smokey the Bear saying only you can prevent malware. Feel free to ask me any questions if you have them now. And round of applause. And if you do want to add me on LinkedIn, if you don't have me already, that is the QR code, and that is the link if you don't trust QR codes. There we go.
Another round of applause for Alexa, please.